I have two of the outputs of the project that I just want to kind of quickly showcase. And those two outputs are our Toolkit, which Izzy has mentioned, and it is our Omeka archive as well. Both things, I think, are a living toolkit. It's a living archive. We are kind of thinking about sustainability. One of the things that we're thinking about in terms of the toolkit, which I'll get to now, as Izzy mentioned, is that we have applied for follow-on funding. But one thing that I think we'll do, regardless if we get the follow-on funding, we'll think about a steering committee for the toolkit to think about how that can be kind of goes on beyond the project. And I'll talk about the toolkit now. So one of the kind of major outputs of the project has been a toolkit. And when we kind of formalized the application for the project, we were kind of thinking, well, toolkit could be a manual, it could be a catalogue, it could be an index. And as the kind of project developed, our ideas of that developed, one of the things that we were really keen on was thinking about, well, if we're thinking about full stack feminism as an ideological framework, we wanted to also make sure that the platforms that we're using reflect that ideological framework. So we were very critical about the platforms that we wanted to use. So the decision then to use the platform PubPub was informed by that. So PubPub is what we could kind of deem as kind of an open platform, an open publishing platform. It's free to use. You can pay 60 quid a year to kind of help with the community going forward, and also there's different tiers, but like the basic platform is very sustainable in many ways. It provides a lot of functionality that you wouldn't get to, you would have to have a bigger project in order to sustain this. So that was our kind of big decision, was to make sure that we're using a platform that can be sustained beyond the lifetime of the project. And there's a lot of practitioners within digital humanities like Rupika Risham, and there's other practitioners as well who are using PubPub because of that accessibility and the way in which it's kind of built around sustainability. It's built around community ideologies. One of the kind of things that we kind of always highlight is the way in which even attribution allows you to put in who peer reviewed, who was part of the data collection, who was part of, early drafting. So it allows that kind of, breaking down of who's part of the research project, and it enables, to kind of attribute that labour, something that is part of the data feminist. Who was talking about data feminism? Julia is part of that kind of acknowledgement of labour. So, so that's what we kind of really like about it. I'm going to move to this side of the lectern. I was going to do a screen capture, but I completely ran out of time. So anyway, so this is our toolkit. It is on PubPub. I can send out a link. And what I wanted to highlight was just two of the collections that we currently have. The first one is Full Stack Feminism Overview and Methodologies. And within that, you can find the stuff that I was talking about this morning about a kind of research, feminist research approach to research. It's a long day. As well as other things. Actually, I'll just click into it. As well as other things related to defining full stack feminism a little bit more. It wants me to add to a reading list, which is great, but not right now. Izzy has written on diffraction as a feminist research method, and then we also have included some of the work that we've done for conferences like Digital Humanities 2023. But in going back to just the kind of toolkit, what I wanted to highlight, oh my God, go home. Is that these are some of the publications that we've written so far. And when I say we, it's members of the team, and it's also members of the wider network. So Winnie and Mara have produced some content for it. Judith is producing some content for it. And what we hope to do with this is to think about this toolkit not as something that we as a team produce, but something that the wider community that engages in. So, we have a particular voice, a particular perspective, but we're really interested in the voices of those that engage with the project as well. When we talked earlier on this morning about kind of full stack feminism as continuous action, we see this as that continuous action, and we see this as that kind of decentering of expertise. We have particular insights into certain things, but we are really keen to make sure that this becomes a resource that is owned by, the community. One of the things that we do as well is that, so for example, so this piece that I've written around inclusive data has been peer reviewed by Kevin Guan, who wrote Queer Data, and Bree Watson, who writes about trans metadata as part of the Trans Metadata Collective. So by doing, by thinking about this as a publication that we have control over, but by actively doing peer review with experts in the field that are part of the network, then we're creating that dialogue, we're creating that conversation, and we're creating, something that becomes living. It's not just us, putting it out there. It's part of that kind of two-way conversation. And I don't have my glasses on, which I should do. I know, I always do this. Yeah. Honestly, I do it about 3 times a day. Okay, so the toolkit is framed around the 3 stacks: data and archives, infrastructure tools and codes, and the third one, access, experience and integration. And as I said, we're kind of slowly building the content that's in there. So one of the things that we are actively doing is we are looking for contributions. So that's where you come in. So if you are interested, if you've got something that you've already written, for example, and would just like to kind of like publish it in a different forum, if you've got things that you've been kind of, people need to know this, please do take a look. Where people are freelance or part-time, we try to make sure that people get paid for that. Again, it's acknowledging labor, it's acknowledging the work that people put into these things. So yes, I would say, take a look at the contribution page, and if you're interested, please do get in contact with us. As I said, we want this to be a living resource, and we see this as a starting point. So we're coming to the kind of part in the project. We are populating this more and more. We want to write more things. That does take time. So we are really interested in co-collaborating, co-producing as well. The other very quick thing that I kind of wanted to highlight is this very small thing that people can't really see, is our Omeka website, so archive. And we are slowly populating that. One of the things that we did as a team, we'd had a creative writing session in May, I want to say June. And so we've started to populate this with kind of feminist objects and feminist objects of creative writing. Again, this is, I think it's fair to say that the archive is in its very kind of early stages. It's only been because Ranju was working on this, so we've only kind of really have the kind of up and running version really in the last couple of weeks. But we're really excited about the possibilities of what this archive can bring. I think it's a way in which that we can populate with, the kind of everyday objects of feminism, everyday objects of kind of like creativity, but also think about the ways in which we have agency of the kind of cultural heritage that we want to have archived. In thinking about its sustainability as well, we are thinking about the ways in which, how we can kind of sustain it beyond the Omeka platform. There's also, I think, something of empowerment about, as I said, agency of your own narrative. But also, I think, in doing that kind of creative sessions that we did together, I was talking earlier on that we learn from each other. Bringing an object and talking about that object and why that speaks to you, I think was very powerful for us as a team. It's something that we did in the Reanimated Data Project. I don't know if people were, Abir, you've been everywhere. You were part of one of those companies. But I think it's, as a kind of feminist praxis, it's really important to really think about what we contribute in terms of that heritage. So Sarah's talking about the heritage that you have in your hall. We all have heritage that does speak to something, that speaks to a story, that speaks to a narrative. And the kind of biggest thing around these things is that, archives of the government do not represent us. So thinking about spaces like this to kind of think about that representation in a more powerful and sustainable way, I suppose. So I'm going to end on that, and I'm going to do another quick turn over here to introduce Erin. So. Sorry. So Erin, I have your notes here, and I also have your bio here, so I will hand over to you in 2 seconds when that comes up. I really feel like I'm juggling now.
You're doing great. You're doing so great.
Come on. Okay, I'll let that load, hopefully. So Erin James is a Brighton-based multidisciplinary artist with a focus on the merging of art and activism through their practices. They are the founder of the socially engaged scene Tough Cookie, as well as a poet, DJ, photographer, and curator. They are the 2023 Stewart Hall Fellow. Fellow at University of Sussex, in which their main research question was: how can creative practices such as poetry, music, and creative writing be used as an alternative output for historical research, for academic prose, and historical archiving? And how can this help reshape and expand our understanding of what education, academic research, and historical archiving can look like, and who is it for?
Oh, that's okay. I've got my phone, so I can do it that way. Yeah, that's fine. Buffering. Like that. Yeah, hi guys. I'm Erin James, as you just heard. Public speaking. Every time I do public speaking, I struggle to breathe for the first 30 seconds. So I quite often like to suggest a collective breath, mainly for my benefit, but you can join in too. So. Yeah, so you just had a little bit about the research that I was sort of looking at. That was my first, being the Stewart Hall Fellow for 2023, for Sussex Uni in 2023 was my first introduction to academia. I dropped out of college when I was 17, had a bad time of it for various reasons, and didn't feel like it was a world that I wanted to step into or belong to. And kind of just felt like, I don't know, this fellowship was the opportunity for me to challenge myself and do that, and also challenge myself on why I think it's not for me. For various reasons. I'm a Black and Jewish mixed person living in Brighton. It's hard. I'm neurodivergent. I live with PTSD. There are things that are real barriers to access to education that I'm sure many people in this room can resonate with. But I kind of figured if I could step into these institutions and do some of the work to then take it out of the institutions and share it with people who don't want to engage with institutions or who have different learning styles, if that's something I can do, then I want to be able to share that. So that's kind of what my research was about. And also in relation to what an archive is, I very much believe in a living archive. I know that's been mentioned as well a few times, so that's nice to know it's a thing outside of my own head. Archives that transcend the physical and become more of the spiritual, and I believe in myself as a living archive, and so that was also sort of what my research was about. It was about removing this idea of objectivity and quantitative data being the standard to ascend to, which is basically parameters set by dead white men. So I kind of figured my own lived experience and outputs such as poetry and creative writing, more personal based methodology could actually be really valued, and a reclamation of research. So I'm going to share one or two poems, depending on time. The first poem is called The Live Archive, which was the name of my fellowship project. It was a methodology poem that I wrote as I was going, and more so at the end to wrap it up. And it's sort of, I find within my poetry, I write things and then they come true, or in this case, I wrote things that had happened in the past, so it kind of feels like a manifestation, but also the opposite of a manifestation, the accumulation of lots of hard work. So yeah, I know, right? Cool, my memory's trash at the moment, but we're gonna try and do this off by heart. Welcome to the Live Archive, a living, breathing poem. Event, idea, method, inquiry, feeling, and emotion. I'm Erin. Artist/researcher, reality unearther, archivist, worker, and social justice searcher. I make music out of language, translating words I've nurtured, and I'm here to share my research. I've been looking at how poetry can be used as research, how art can contribute to more alternative, accessible, decolonial, non-traditional, unimaginably repositional forms of research. What education can look like, I am reimagining, as well as who it can include and what traditions we are challenging. It's important to understand this work is not just my own. Here lies a history far bigger than what can easily be known. This is a legacy so deep I am trying to break open. So with each word that is spoken, hear not just my voice, hear everyone and everything that influenced this choice. See all the images unarchived, excluded and left out. Taste the blood of paper cuts of pages turned and sources found. Feel the grief of every soul with seeds, but no soil left to sprout. I have the opportunity of being heard in a way that many others have not, so let this research be for every single story that was lost. Now, my method and approach to this was actually non-existent. I led with intuition, and with my ancestors guiding me, I watched this project and my process bloom into fruition. I attended lectures and seminars digging into the curriculum. I met with teachers, library staff, friends, academics, PhDers, poets, researchers, students, and artists. Amongst the living, I also met the dead. Through library books, archives, images, and poems, and before my eyes and in my soul, my purpose was set in motion. It was clear my research was action-based, art-based and fast-paced, intense and overwhelming and ancestral as my heart raced. I began my first big step, poem transcriptions. I took these chunky theoretical texts academics had written, breaking down theories into sound and spoken word, which were then added to the curriculum and in class discussed and listened. Next, I took on articles, weaving poetry within, selecting sources, finding nuggets of knowledge and trying to tie them in. I held intentional conversations with Black academics, taking notes and undoing themes to uncover rigid seams of the academic world and its colonial caste schemes. I spent time in the archives, renting and reading works, traveling in time through the pages as history was stirred. I presented my research at the Stuart Hall Researchers Workshop and independently hosted 5 workshops of my own, and by asking participants at the end for one word, I created 3 ethnographic poems from the experiences I'd heard. I made 5 mini zines reflecting 5 mini moments, telling 5 different tales of activist-based omens. I collected this and more and creatively poured this into an archive, both physical and digital. Both digital and physical. And speaking of the physical, do you see what I've done? I've spun this on its head and presented everyone. This is the live archive. It's sitting on my tongue. This is the live archive. Take what you've learned and tell someone. This is the live archive, and it has only just begun. Thank you. Thanks. Cool. I think I got time for one more poem. Great. Yeah. So this one is a found poem. And I've got some notes about what a found poem is, because I'm still trying to understand. This is another buffering moment. Yeah. So this was my first independent research poem. Sit down for a sec. So yeah, this can be considered a found poem. Found poems take existing texts and refashion them, reorder them, and present them as poems. They are the literary equivalent of a collage. I quite like that metaphor. So I'm going to try, for other people's words that I have like directly sourced and used, I'll put my hands up. So when my hand is up, that's someone else's words. If you'd like to see the written version of this and actually like look at the sources that I've used, then I can share that with you later. I have a digital archive. The main sort of source and inspiration for this poem was by someone called Kravitz Marshall, and a publication in An Injustice. This is called The Gender Binary as a Tool of White Supremacy, and it has trigger warnings for transphobia, racism, anti-Semitism, yeah, all of that lovely stuff. And I guess also I just wanted to mention that from my experience, I really do appreciate trigger warnings, and I haven't found that exists in academia. From someone living with PTSD, it's really helpful to even just have like a 10-second warning sometimes of like, I'm going to talk about something that could directly affect you. So gently sharing that. Okay. Spoiler alert. The gender binary is a tool of white supremacy. It is a product of colonization. It's a result of bordered nations. I'm not saying male or female didn't exist before, broken backs and feet in mud and ancestral cracks and trickling blood. I'm saying there was so much more than just male or female. Fast forward a couple of 100 years and we're told this trans angst is the new thing to fear, that we should shift our gears and act out of hate. It's bait. The state is serving up its lies like pudding on a plate. Clearly they are scared of the difference, the brilliance, ethereal omniscience, emotional resilience, undeniable magnificence of trans folks. They don't know that trans folks have always existed and always will. Now, transphobia is ripe in the air, and it stinks of the same strange truth they've been trying to feed black and queer people for an eternity. The modernity of saying toleration is enough, and the absurdity of thinking this is just the new snowflake touch. We've been told recognition of one's gender should be enough, but doesn't it also take love, acceptance, and allies speaking up? If trans folks have to be diagnosed with dysphoria, go before a panel, be of a certain age, prove it's not a phase, take on the weight of others' gaze, cross borders for surgery, wait and wait and wait, and list be overlooked and underpaid, how can recognition ever be enough in this nation? We desperately need action, but we also need education. So I will share some things I found and let this poem be a roof, and underneath there lies a house holding together what is loose. We've heard of the scientific racism of measuring skulls that was used. The definition of racial purity was designed to abuse, while similar methods were made to define the binary and to confuse, to suggest that this gender distinction wasn't for savages to misuse. They told people of color they weren't worthy of fitting into their binaries, but if some of us somehow had access to our ancestors' diaries, we'd know certain tribes and cultures didn't see gender as rigid. It was not a solid thing. It flowed and changed and moved like liquid. Ask the Gaba people of Ghana, who base gender on energy over anatomy, or other Western tribes who discard gender because what was important was personality. The Dogon tribe of Mali worships Nomo. Ancestral spirits, androgynous and mystical, they were referred to as the teachers. So may they teach us this is more than just mythical. It's not fictitious or trivial. The Mbuti of the Congo wait till after puberty for gender to be visible. Imagine growing up with the choice to have a say, unconditional. This goes beyond Africa. There is so much more we weren't told. Our history was whitewashed, straightened, and sold. There are two-spirit folk who belong to indigenous Native America. Can history finally teach us that this is not something irregular? India's community of Hajaras have held important roles for over 2,000 years, traced to Hindu holy text, their existence you cannot try to smear. In Aboriginal Australia, you'll find sister girls and brother boys. Trans folks could claim new names, and through these names, maybe find joy. Magnus Hirschfeld, a Jewish-German sexologist, offered the first gender-affirming surgeries regularly and more, from tumtums to sarais. Judaism recognizes up to 8 different genders at its core. The far right in colonizing countries robbed us of our culture. They almost stamped it out and swallowed it up like greedy vultures. We've been lied to our whole lives and conditioned to other our trans friends. Well, it's time to educate and listen, both in present and future tense. Because when you deep it, the Western world externalizes homophobia to Africa and other places. And yes, there is homophobic and transphobic legislation there, but it was left by colonial traces. They introduced this rigid system, now seem to shake and shame their faces. It's a distraction from the grip of colonization that shapes this nation and is built on hatred. So what's the point of this poem, and what am I trying to say? Maybe it's more for you to decide and not up to me to pave some way. I just ask you take these words of you and spend some time with them one day, because the day that this is common knowledge is a day for which I pray. Thank you, that's me.